South Africa, a message to Jenny. Mencius Moldbug. October 20, 2009. Unqualified Reservations. Narrated by Skeptical Waves. South Africa, a message to Jenny. I apologize for the apparent dereliction of her. I have been working on a somewhat longer post, on the design of the antiversity. It will appear this Thursday. Footnote 1. Unfortunately, Moldbug never did publish his description of the antiversity design. In the meantime, I thought I would steal some content from another blog and post it here for your consideration and discussion. The original authors cannot possibly protest, because they are racists and racists have no rights. The victim of my piratical act is perhaps the world's most notorious racist blog, South Africa Sucks. It is certainly the world's best racist blog, though the competition in this category is hardly stiff. Even SAS has seen better days. Its founder and best writer, the Uhuru Guru, also a dark master of Photoshop with a seemingly endless collection of primate stock photography, is semi-retired. Of course there is a large quantity of idiotic, illiterate stormfront Nazism to be found at SAS, especially in the comments. But at least they have an official policy against Jew-hating. Moreover, the great secret of SAS is that in general the posters are former liberals. That said, SAS is a cesspool of modern hate. I study it. I don't endorse it. I certainly will not link to it, and on balance its effect on its goals is probably counterproductive. Nonetheless, as we'll see, it clearly has a cathartic effect for many people. If you wonder why any literate, intelligent person would read a website that feels no shame whatsoever in stitching the head of Nelson Mandela to the body of Papio Anubis, perhaps you should start with this brief review in that impeccably conscious journal, Newsweek. The most dramatic figures can be found among South African whites, who are leaving at a pace consistent with the advent of widespread disease, mass natural disasters or large-scale civil conflict, according to a report by the South African Institute on Race Relations. Some 800,000 out of a total white population of 4 million have left since 1995, by one count. Widespread disease, mass natural disasters or large-scale civil conflict. Well, I never. Who'd have thunk it? As we have come to expect here at all the wrong people. Whatever present history is, it is not the story of the victory of the accurate predictors. So, from reason's standpoint, there is a reason to read the wrong people. Read on. For your reading comfort, I have elided all racial slurs and other potty language from the pirated text. SAS being SAS, this was quite a bit of work. If you need the context of this discussion, try this search, but I think it is fairly clear. The details are certainly not important. Our original poster, Doodler, writes. Today we received for a change, a reasonably more rational criticism from Jenny who opines. Enough with all of this hatred, guys. Maybe I am a liberal, and maybe all the horrible things that you have been saying are true, but vomiting such bile is helping no one. I challenge you all to take a long, hard look at yourselves and decide whether calling people slur makes you superior in any way, whether playing the blame game makes this country any better, and whether Bianca, may she rest in peace, would really have wanted her death to have led to such outpourings of hatred, violence and abuse. Peace be with you all. This comment has made me consider, once more, why we contribute to this blog. Interesting that she agrees that the horrible things we say are true. But then, in the same sentence she says that vomiting such bile is helping no one. With respect, I disagree vehemently with you. You see, Jenny, we have a moral obligation to let the rest of the world know exactly what is happening in SA. Some of the bloggers here used to be ardent liberals. For me, I used to be a left-winger. I also really believe that post-1994 would be the beginning of the Rainbow Nation and we would all live happily in La La Land. Stupid, huh? Unfortunately you, together with tens of thousands of white sands, are one of those brainwashed persons who seriously believe, and hope, that if you ignore the problem it will go away. I do not for 1 minute blame you. This is a common reaction evinced by the vast majority of peace-loving people. They just want to be left alone to do their own thing, and enjoy their lives. Nothing wrong with that. On Saturday, I met a white lady who has recently returned to slur after spending around 7 years in the USA. She is totally horrified at the situation here and how dramatically things have changed for the worse in the time she was gone. She is going back as soon as she can. But anyway, Jen, the point is that you need to read the articles and the comments here in the correct context. Those people who vomit bile are outraged about the doings and screwings of our inventive slur. They are not blinded by the MSM. They see the emperor as stark naked. They experience the unpleasantness of living in SA. Of having to watch your back continuously. Of going into attack mode when the alarm system is triggered. Of worrying that your spouse/kids will arrive home safely without being hijacked and killed. Of walking into a restaurant and checking that their security arrangements are adequate. Shall I continue? I think you get my drift. Truth is that they know they are helpless and cannot do anything about it. For all the braggadocio some of them exclaim, they know they can do zilch. So they express these feelings in a way some find odious. But at least they are venting. It is also not a question of playing the blame game as you put it. It is pointing out facts. Which, by your own admission, are true. You may not like it, but they are true. Your reference to Bianca is a bit below the belt. I honestly mourn her passing, because had things turned out a bit differently, that could have been my own daughter. I really do not want to comment on that. So Jenny, in closing, this blog and what it seeks to achieve, is there for you too. I'm pretty sure we have touched your heart and maybe, hopefully planted a seed in your mind. I wish you well in your future. And please, be careful out there. This, of course, attracted much agreement, and also some trolls. What kind of crazy liberal would be trolling a blog like SAS? Plenty, as it turns out, a measure of the blog's impact. SAS gets a lot more hits than I think, though these are of course much lower quality hits. Al, Arabized expletive, writes. You guys disgust me. I have never seen so much hatred in my life. Considering that this website only seems to perpetuate racism and hatred, what possible good do you think can come of it? All of you seem to have this false rhetoric that your goal is noble and for the good of white South Africans. People like you only increase racism and incidences of crimes and racial attacks in South Africa. When you treat black people with such contempt and ignominy, you cause them to feel the same feelings towards white people. I'm not sure on any of your backgrounds, but I'm guessing most of you are middle-aged men who felt that apartheid was the best time of your lives. Well, as part of the new generation, I feel it my duty to thank all of you for, expletive, over future generations of white South Africans. All apartheid did was lead to the expletive, which is South Africa today. All of you sit here and blame the blacks for all the problems, when in fact the very root of the problems today stem from white South African actions during apartheid. You have made your bed, now sleep in it. Apartheid robbed the black population of two extremely important factors, education and family life. Without education, the black population is largely unskilled and thus left poor and destitute with few opportunities, leading them to look elsewhere and sometimes turn to crime. Without family life, the current young population of blacks was robbed of having good role models in their lives and had few family values as a result. The only way to get past this is to move forward. What you are all doing will serve only to make matters worse and lead to further violence. There are better ways to react than through hatred. I have been subject to many robberies and muggings, and of course, they always leave a sour taste in the mouth. But hatred and racism will not solve any of it. I'm not saying sit back and do nothing, but rather get involved in ways to instill values and education back into the black population, and this is what many white South Africans are doing now. What the expletive are you guys doing to help? I have been subject to many robberies and muggings, and of course, they always leave a sour taste in the mouth. Open your ears to the subtle beauty of pure self-expression. Just like Jenny's message, just like Doodler's response, the author's limited literacy serves only to emphasize the sincerity of the content. These people are not wankers. They are not exercising their wits, out of sheer boredom and egotism, on some lame internet board. They are saying what they genuinely believe. Certainly, no one could write any of these messages without believing in them entirely and completely. This is not literature, it is truth. From two very different directions. This, of course, provokes the fascists, literate and otherwise, of SAS, to explosive plumage. In one of the more intelligible responses, Crystal Clear writes, when you treat black people with such contempt and ignominy, you cause them to feel the same feelings towards white people. No, actually it's the other way around. I was once one of you ignorant liberals, but after being treated with contempt and ignominy my perspective has been changed. Not by whites, but by blacks. My kids grew up in a liberal blush and everyone is equal home, and went to govern, slur, schools. Until one day they came home and announced that black people were stupid and violent and kept on disrupting the classes, and my daughter was afraid to be anywhere on the school grounds alone. I didn't teach them that. I tried to make them see my liberal point of view. Being exposed to slur behavior daily made them see the light. Thank heavens I saw the light soon after. Purely from observation and personal experiences, you know the kind, attempted hijacking, robberies, murder. Yep, experienced them all. This is one white liberal that learnt the hard way that blacks are a violent, lazy, ignorant, stupid, hateful species which have no dignity or compassion. If anyone at the SPLC reads her, they must be spasming repeatedly in their pants. Here we see the very birth of hate, recounted in original testimony in less than 100 words. How can a good liberal slip from the path of righteousness, and become a hater? Ask crystal clear. The whiteness studies professors of the world should be beating a path to his or her door. Anani has an even more direct response. The country I once knew, called South Africa, has had a serious stroke, a slur stroke. I look at my country today on a map and it is still in the same location it was 1,000 years ago. The cities are still there, so are the trees and the wild animals, etc., but, alas, I don't recognize it anymore. It has grown into a monstrous failure steered by unmoral melanotic madmen hell-bent on usurping my next of kin's inner souls. South Africa had 15 years to prove itself. Sadly, it has failed utterly and dismally. That, my friend, is what this blog is all about. We, the bloggers of this fine blog, will not surrender our cause. Go, expletive, yourself, you useless geek. But it is anti-slur, who responds with the mother of all racist comments. After editing this comment, which make the Nixon transcripts look like the speeches of Lord Russell, I had to reboot my computer to get it out of the clipboard. Please, everyone, never, ever post anything like this on her. Nonetheless, it is a primary source and a tiny piece of history, and, like all these messages, unquestionably sincere. I read all this, expletive from liberal, expletive, like Al, expletive, and Jenny, slur expletive, and the only conclusion that I can come to is that only people with brains had the foresight after developments in southern Africa surrounding the so-called independence of Angola, Mozambique, Rhodesia, Zambia etc. to see that SA was, expletive. There was no way that a white minority population was going to hold off the exploding black population. There was also no way that the expletive were going to incorporate this white population into the new dispensation and afford them any minority rights. The consequence of that is SA as we see it today, with a black backlash against the whites for perceived injustices that is gaining momentum daily. The ANC terrorist kleptocracy has had 20 years to get their act together and have instead used it to squander untold billions of rands on enriching themselves. Our 200 billion Eskom deficit, our 60 billion arms deal for a war against who? Another are 47 billion for the Airbus military transport plane debacle, and if we add up the personal excesses of each and every other minor slur in national, regional and local government with their collection of Mercedes-Benzes, BMWs, Audis etc., we could easily round this figure off to R1 trillion squandered by the slur since the release of the false god Mandela in 1990. In the interim, they have transformed the country into a veritable, expletive, pit with an unmanageable crime problem that in turn is devolving into and spawning gangsters who are transforming into warlords and a law unto themselves. ANC incompetence has seen every component of the systems and structures that hold a society and an economy together fracture and disintegrate, rendering them nothing more than a small collection of greedy, expletive, pigs with access to the trough that the other 60 million behind them are fighting to get to. As such, there is no government in SA. Everything is falling to pieces as they spend uncontrollably. Law and order does not exist. The police and the judiciary is a expletive mockery. The Sant is defunct. The Metro is a collection of expletive criminals in uniform. Public healthcare is expletive, and they now want to expletive the private healthcare sector. Service delivery is collapsing. There is no maintenance of any component of the infrastructure. Roads are falling apart. Electricity delivery is falling apart. Water reticulation is falling apart. Education is a expletive joke. Just what exactly are these expletive governing if they claim to be a government? The misery that this has visited on the slur population and the potential for further misery, which is the hallmark of Africa, is incalculable, and one cannot help asking the question of just how much of this could have been alleviated if the ANC terrorist regime had sought to address the so-called past imbalances by judicious expenditure of the billions they have squandered. The reason they didn't address the so-called past imbalances is because there weren't any. The useless, expletive, inherited a perfectly viable and functional country, economy and infrastructure. All they had to do was sustain it. Anyway, I'm not going to unpack this any further. The point is the slur have, expletive, everything up for themselves. White people with the savvy to see that SA was heading down the expletive, same as all the other slur countries prepared for it and made provision to get out of South Africa and have made comfortable, safe lives for themselves and their children in countries all over the world. I'm honestly of the opinion that the bulk of the whites that have stayed in SA are liberal nanny bangers, and as we have seen, liberals are expletive retards who identify with the slur because they themselves are white slur. One of the more peculiar characteristics of these white liberal slur is that they blame whites who have expressed outrage on this site about the murder of whites for the hatred and criminal violence in SA, but what escapes them is that where blacks are concerned, this manifests in the crime against whites that we see in SA every day. It manifests in the insane babble spewed by this expletive primate, Malemo, who also had some offensive acronym journalists spouting expletive juice all over the place the other day about what a fantastic little slur he was, and it manifests in the perpetual anti-white rhetoric that gets blasted out by the media all the time at every opportunity. However, the anger and outrage of whites after nearly 20 years of escalating persecution by the slur has to date only really manifested in the type of sentiment often expressed on this site. But somehow in the mind of the liberal expletive people like me, going off and swearing the expletive slur into Hades and back is a worse indictment than marauding armed slur, running around in groups attacking and killing defenseless whites wherever they can at every opportunity. It begs the question of whether I, as a white with the interests of the white population, regardless of how inappropriately they are expressed, at the center of my convictions, should concern myself with expletive idiots who get themselves killed by expletive around in slur areas? Should I concern myself with mentally expletive retarded expletive who haven't got the pig expletive between their ears to sit their wives or daughters down and do everything in their power to dissuade them from putting their lives in danger? Why the expletive? Didn't this woman's parents and husband encourage her to become a vet and then throw her into the lion's den at Joburg Zoo after convincing her that she would be safe from the lions because she was there to help them? Two different scenarios but the same measure of expletive stupidity. 4. Expletive, how many expletive stupid liberal retards have been killed, expletive, around in slur areas trying to help them, and people are still convinced 20 years down the road that it was because of a put hate and everything wrong in SA today is the fault of whites, currently and historically. I didn't know this girl from a bar of soap, but the rage that swept through me when I read the article elicited my response. When I saw the photos of her pathetic little body under that space blanket, her shoes off, probably stolen by slur, and her blonde hair, I cried that such a beautiful, talented young woman should die at the prime of her youth killed by expletive slur, who according to their ages should have had the same opportunities to do something with their lives according to the promises of the lying ANC terrorists. After all, they were born after a put hate was defeated. And according to the liberal expletive brigade, that makes me worse than the perpetrators of deeds like this? Once again, should I concern myself with this? Because not concerning myself with the white genocide in SA amounts to apathy, and apathy amounts to doing nothing, as the one expletive slur expletive here said, the type of nothing that involves chilling and smoking daga and pretending that this is not happening in SA. What the liberal expletive don't realize is that evil triumphs when people do nothing, and that's what happened in SA. Whites did nothing to prevent the triumph of evil, and evil of the nature of the heinous black racist crimes we see in SA has triumphed. It seems further that these liberal expletive believe that whites in SA should resign themselves to paying permanent penance, for the so-called past injustices, and in the process, murder victims like Bianca should just be regarded as acceptable consequences. What about all the good that white people have done for the slur in SA? Do these expletive liberals want to sit there and tell us that the whites did far more bad for the slur than they did good? Well, according to the TRC, apartheid wasn't so bad for the blacks after all, which raises the question that if reprisals for the so-called past injustices justifies the genocide of whites in SA today, then by the same logic, what should whites expect from blacks in return for the schools, houses, hospitals, universities, etc., etc., etc. that we provided for the blacks? Because so far all they're telling us is that we should be groveling at their feet, licking their expletive for sparing us the genocide in 1994 that they've been so industriously engaged in on a piecemeal basis ever since. Over 35,000 innocent unarmed white civilian men, women and children, including 3,085 white farmers murdered by armed black racist slur. Well, as I said, I've come to the conclusion that white South Africans with the brains, talent and ability to make it in other safer, better countries have done so. I certainly have. And the ones that have stayed behind are the mentally retarded liberals who believe that a subspecies characterized by their congenital predisposition for killing whites for trinkets of little to no value is going to allow them and their children to live in peace and prosperity in slur. There should actually be no reason why that should not be the case. Given the vast spaces and massive natural wealth in SA, the requirements, even on a level of a fairly wealthy lifestyle, of the tiny population of 2 million whites should be of no consequence, but apparently the slur And the liberals don't agree and feel that the last penance, for the so-called evils of apartheid still have not been milked from this small population. Some clever oak once said that there was nothing as infinite as the universe and human stupidity, and I believe that given the postings of aforementioned liberal expletive on this site, another dimension can be added to the infinity of human stupidity, and that is that liberals are the black holes of infinite human stupidity. I have no further ties to slur. I may have harbored a desire to one day go back there, but that diminishes with each day that I read expletive like this, and quite frankly even more so when I consider that I would be surrounded by expletive and perverts in a cesspit of crime and evil, and frankly I don't give a expletive about the place anymore. As sad as it may be, if young whites like Bianca Warburton are going to risk their lives to be sacrificed on the altar of liberalism, multiculturalism and a variety of other slur expletive cults, while the liberal expletive fraternity applauds their demise as they hail the humanity of the slur who kill them, then should we really give a expletive? Again, please do not post anything like this ever at It is historical evidence, not literature. How do you respond to a scenario like this, without becoming a Nazi? Discuss, without making me filter the comments, please. Readers may also feel refreshed and restored by this impeccably written progressive essay about the fate of Detroit, which features some aerial shots that are simply breathtaking. Is it possible to write a progressive essay about the fate of Detroit? Yes, Virginia, it is.